So we're back. Welcome back. All probably mom, maybe Jody,
Moms,
maybe yes, yeah, maybe like the ones that love us the most.
moms watching.
Yeah, somebody I don't know. Probably not. Definitely not my mom. That's a different show, different topic. But last episode was pretty good. I think we kind of hit gold in terms of kind of which direction to take this thing, and it's the idea of chasing down these traditional church legalistic views that the church has, and then the possibility that there's maybe some things that we need to be opened up to in terms of connections, that there may be more than what traditional Sunday has to talk about.
In a nutshell, the church is scared of the supernatural.
So how much of the supernatural do you, let's just take the easy one. Ghosts.
Ghosts,
Do they exist?
disembodied spirits.
Okay, whatever you want to call it. But like, if I'll give you a good for instance, Kim's in here the other day, calls me up on the phone while she's in this 100-year-old building. There's ghosts in here. I just stepped back and someone was standing behind me, and then they were gone. And I'm like,
So she turned around and saw him.
yeah, well,
Going in
had
the
that
flash?
creepy feeling like,
Just
who's, oh, Jimmy? Nope, not you. Wait, there's no one there.
experienced that before.
Okay, but is that, to me, that's just,
Your own psyche.
yeah, that's just, the things that go bump in the night playing with your head, like when you're on watch and you're staring at a wood line, for the enemy to come across, and every blade of grass that moves looks like somebody,
No, there's something there all the time.
Explain. Like, actually, how would you, it's funny, because Pastor last night was talking about the plagues in Exodus. And I never actually paid any attention to this, mainly because all this was when I was younger, when I was exposed to all these Bible stories, especially the Old Testament. I loathed the Old Testament as a kid. But now I find it kind of intriguing because it is this Hollywood version of kind of chaos. There's a lot of death, a lot of fighting, a lot of war, a lot of plagues, a lot of demons, a lot of everything. And he's talking about how the magicians for Pharaoh could do everything that could recreate everything that the plagues were doing.
Yeah,
It's kind of wild. I was like, huh. So magic does exist.
I would say
Like David Copperfield, David
the
Blaine.
line between illusion and magic.
Right.
To be able to sleight of hand something versus.
But,
I've watched lots of them shows where those street magicians are doing stuff that is way beyond just a sleight of hand.
Yeah, I think there's,
Something that's got to be said for there's something.
Some of those card tricks just don't seem, no one's that good.
Or
nobody's
Or
that
when they
good.
do the throw the quarter at the bottle and it's inside of the bottle trick or whatever. I mean, besides the fact it's on TV and you're not there live watching.
Right. It's funny. I feel like most of magic nowadays is simply like, ooh, watch this on YouTube or on social media. It's like, oh, look what I did, because you did it on camera. Like in real life, I think it's a group of volunteers that are like, oh my God, having these professional reactions.
CGI and AI and whatnot. I mean, if you could incorporate some serious technology into messing with somebody, you could probably do stuff to them all day long to make them think. What was the movie? Real Genius? They put the microphone in his tooth.
Right.
So they
could,
this is God.
I'm doing it with AI right now, making a bunch of videos. Right now, I've got one where there's a bear face-to-face with a hiker, and I mean, it looks better than any Star Wars movie. It looks real.
Some crazy stuff. I don't understand that part of it.
But like, let's just say there's an advanced civilization out there, alien civilization out there, that made these pyramids all over the world and on each different continent. And let's just say, if we look at right now, 10 years ago, actually 3 years ago, what we're doing with AI, advanced technology, would have been, no one would have doubted it. They would have thought it was CGI, but they couldn't believe it was done by somebody in their basement. How much of our time is just such a blip on the radar that we're looking past the Bible and into other counts of history, like the Mayans. They have celestial things, their pyramids, their technologies, their petroglyphs all have similar resemblance to things in Egypt and things in China and things all over the world. This is long, long before people were even traveling intercontinentally. So where does the Bible fall in that? Why aren't we getting that full story from the Bible? Or are we? We're not seeing it. Like, that's kind of what I'm looking for here.
Well, there's a whole world that was going on around the Bible. That's just one little speck of civilization, basically. It's a good question, though, thought of like what exactly was going on. And it seems like even in cultures, like I saw a thing the other day talking about the Phoenicians traveled, they believe, all the way over to America and all the way over to South America. And they've got artifacts that they found from them, and they were supposedly one of the most intelligent and advanced civilizations just because they kind of saw so many different things. So maybe they just left traces of things as their travels to the east, and civilizations, I guess, took things from them, whether it be adornment that they wore or animals that they represented and worship, or symbolization or symbols like that they used. But I think there's common factors that are pretty evident that it all goes back to the serpent and the fallen angels, because there's similar things that go on, especially throughout the North and South America.
Are we going back to Nephilim?
With the giants. Well, we'll just go with the giants in general. There's all kinds of evidence that the giants were there. And then on top of that, like the Pueblo civilization that said they prayed to things that came through portals. I mean, what are these portals that they came through?
That ghost, because they were sitting out in their
what
in
if
the
it's
desert
just this blue beam or hologram technology that we have now? Maybe they had that technology created, and there was a huge gap. The way I see it is the fallen ones' technology to the humans that they interacted with and bred with and got to worship them, and then the humans that were set apart from them were going to follow their ways, even if they're not directly connected with them, because they see their power. And they're putting on a show. Like you were saying, the magi, the magician, whatever, they could do all the same things as Moses and, could do with the staff.
Do you think the magicians of that day were the ones that were bilingual, if you want to use that?
Yeah,
that
probably.
Where they could communicate and trade that knowledge?
Absolutely. That's what language is all about. The devil used it in the same way throughout history.
So if we look back at these portals or these creatures that are worshipped or drawn on cave walls or on pyramid, sculptures and things that are similar. It's that one with the big weird head, and they all have very similar, almost identical drawings from lands that were nowhere near connected, 3, 4, 5,000 years ago or more.
All the stuff they've said they've hidden in the Grand Canyon, the Egyptian temples that were inside of the rocks. Have you ever heard of all of that stuff?
No, sir.
It's supposed to be like you walked inside of a Egyptian pyramid, hieroglyphs and the cave art and the adornments. And they even said they had found a room full of giant skeletons that were between 12 to 17, 20 feet tall. Kind of buried in a ceremonial way.
If we look at that and then we say, okay, let's agree that those are defective angels. What is the sons of angels, daughters of angels?
Yes.
Is that
sons and daughters, the giants, the direct Nephilim.
So we're saying we're going to agree at the moment that angels departed heaven, came to earth, and bred with humans. Now, if we can agree with that, then we're going to agree that there is a heaven, and heaven can be what we're told on Sunday, or heaven could just be, we'll just call it a place for right now, where God exists. So are we able to connect the dots as Christians and say, okay, we believe that there are sons of and daughters of angels out here, which means angels came down, which meant they came from heaven or hell? Because if they left heaven, that's where I'm getting hung up is, angels wouldn't leave heaven, because the only time that happened that's been recorded is when, Lucifer, challenged God and got cast.
Look, the true hell in ideology is God removing himself from. So they're living in nothing, like the void, which is, I guess, the one thing that we couldn't understand.
But what's the lake of fire?
That's hell. That's like the bondage part of hell. That's the part of hell, I guess, that you get stuck in. And then when God removes himself from that, I guess there's no more lake of fire.
Did you ever watch the TV show Lucifer?
A little bit.
Did you ever see it long enough where
Not
they
really.
showed their depiction of hell?
No.
So it was very interesting, because his depiction of hell in that show was really just a barren place where people were more or less trapped in their worst fear, I guess. It was very barren and cold and isolate and void. It was void of everything, and then everyone had their own little, every little person had their own little room with their
little clique.
Yeah, whatever that
They
one thing
deserved.
was. So I thought it was an interesting show, because I feel like it depicted the relationship that this conversation's painting in my mind, which is God, Lucifer, or the devil, and hell, as not, almost like one doesn't exist without the other.
Or like a byproduct of
like
pollution.
Like you can't have cops without robbers, and you can't have good without bad. Like there's almost no way to measure something without the opposite of it. And if we start painting a picture where we have a physical representation of giants, and we have physical accounts of giants, and we believe that these giants came from departed angels that bred here on earth, where in the Bible where is that written? Where do we go back and refer to the Bible first? Because I think we have to identify where in the Bible that is validated. And then we can look at other cultures.
Where is Genesis 6 is where it starts. And then when is the flood? Is that Genesis 12, 14?
It was April. It was raining.
I mean, the book of, I don't.
But you see what I mean?
And then after that, there's just evidence of them by the worship of the gods, as in brick idols or stone idols or wood idols.
Right.
So obviously the fallen ones had learned their lesson with putting themselves in a position. Because see, the whole reason why they bred with man was to get dominion on earth. They have to follow rules. They're not allowed to control us. They can mess with us because they're not allowed to, quote unquote, control us. We have to, it's free will. They can only work on what's working against us, which is our flesh. And then that could feed into our spirit and our soul. So by the time you get into the Old Testament period, even like, I think Egypt itself was a great example of a totally different land, but close enough to Israel itself. Cain land at that point, to see how they were worshiping the false gods. The Pharaoh was basically a king, but he was ordained as a god in human form, I guess. So that's the first form of what you would kind of consider a Christ. I guess that's what the imagery of the Bible and why it's written into the Bible like it is. Mainly father figures of families throughout different tribes, all throughout what now is Iran and Saudi Arabia and all that, just tribal people with names. And I think after the flood, they learned their lesson that, we're not going to sit up here and, because imagine it like this. If you were a god, what's the best way to make somebody believe in you as a god?
Well, so you're saying that before the flood is when the Nephilim came down.
Yeah, that's why God flooded the earth, specifically because of what was going on with the giants.
All right, so this is making
what it had pushed man to do amongst themselves because of that.
But then if God wiped out the entire earth and only saved Noah and his family and, the animals on the ark. If that was the end of the giants, then where did Goliath come from?
He's supposed to be left over from the Nephilim.
But from where? That's what you should like. Are you saying Nephilim blood was running through Noah's
Bloodline,
family?
yes.
So it was now just one of those weird genes where you just, hey, you throw off a good wide receiver every now and then.
It's all science. If you follow people's DNA, you can follow back to.
Has anyone ever like isolated that marker, that giant marker?
Yeah, lots of people have. China's probably first and foremost. They're the ones that control Ancestry.com and all those other things. They have, I mean, besides the fact they're going to just use the DNA code for bioweapons.
So are you saying that there's a possibility that China is harvesting DNA to clone the original Nephilim bloodlines to create its own army of giants?
Could be. There's theory that the 10 kings will be giants.
Okay.
Reborn.
So
genetically through science. So
have you seen the show Reacher?
I know that.
Not the movie, but the TV show.
No, I haven't seen
So
the show.
there's an actor, I think he's a Danish actor, but he's a giant, like a literal. They say his bloodline is a giant. The guy is massive. They said the difference between being a genetic, and maybe this is, why someone's 7 foot tall. Maybe it's that gene coming out, but it's not a pure gene. That's why, basketball players have health problems. But the difference between him and like he's bigger than Shaq. Like they got pictures of where he's standing next to Shaq, and Shaq looks like a little guy.
Wow. Big.
Yeah, but he's huge. He's like, he's proportionate. His body is proportionate. His metabolism is, everything's proportionate. So they say he doesn't have any health problems from his size. That's what makes him categorized as a actual giant. Like there's a medical term for all that in research, and he falls in that category. So I'd be curious, like Andre the Giant. He drank himself to death, but he was a healthy guy outside of his alcoholism. Big dude.
There's documented history all over the earth of giant people like that living in different civilizations throughout history, different countries. So it's definitely a gene, I'm sure, that's been passed on. But the question is somebody manipulating?
So what about if we assume we're going to be on board with Nephilim? We're going to be on board with that they were, accounted for in the Bible. We're going to be on board that they have bloodlines to this day that still pop up every now and then. We'll agree that Noah, the flood wiped them out. But we're going to maybe take a step back and say, well, if they came here from angels that walk the earth, from a Christianity standpoint, that our interpretation of the Bible is that these angels could be coming from blue portals that other civilizations are talking about, and that they came here once, they came here again, they could come back again.
Well, do you want to talk about the Anunnaki then? That's just the same thing we just said, but the belief that they were aliens, ancient aliens, ancient giant, superior humanoid aliens, and we were basically made from them. We were made from them to be who we are right now. So there's a whole nother angle.
So we're not saying,
opposite end of the
but
spectrum.
That doesn't quite jive with Adam and Eve.
Absolutely, it doesn't jive with Adam and Eve.
The Anunnaki.
Yeah, the alien concept. That's like I guess you would say the originator, or at least that's what the alien community uses as these are the original aliens.
So you're saying that Satan, the devil, came up with the Anunnaki?
I don't know.
Well, what are you saying though? That's the question.
Well,
What are our understanding of Adam and Eve? Could that? I don't think there was God created the heavens and the earth. There was 7 days. I don't think it means 7 literal days. It could be 7 seconds. It could just be a way to frame time. I don't know. I don't think it's really even relevant except for the number. In the end, if Adam and Eve were the result of, what's the word I'm looking for? If the Bible is using the analogy of God as a real God, not doubting God's existence, but would it make sense if God is an alien because he's not of Earth. Earth is of him, or, it's the other way around. The egg came before the chicken kind of thing. If God is on the planet Zork, or Mork from Orc,
Mormon?
God's from Orc, okay? God is from
Gotcha.
Orc, okay? And when he decided to populate Earth, maybe God was, his world was a world that he wanted to just create a new world because he was bored. And he comes to Earth, and Earth is a mess. He comes in with his technology or his power, power, technology. Let's just say that's the same thing. Applies his technology to Earth to make it inhabitable. Takes the two people, Adam and Eve, starts the petri dish of what's going to be his sea monkey experiment. Okay. And then kicks the ball off. What is he to say? Okay, guys, we have all this technology that can do this and that we can't explain because you two are amoeba right now. You're just barely a couple cells that are putting two and two together. You're still running around scratching your butts and chasing each other around the forest here. Why wouldn't he say, okay, let's teach this civilization as they evolve? And I don't mean from an evolution like the other, people that don't believe in the Bible speak, but the evolution of how God started the human race and Earth and how it evolved until we get to a point that we can understand what God actually is in face to face, in person. Is it too far-fetched to say that when God comes back, it's coming back as this God from Orc with all this technology and things that is the perfect world? Like, you see what I'm getting at? Like,
that'll be the fake God.
Okay.
That'll be the one that the devil wants you to believe.
Well, that's what I'm getting at is,
it says right at the end of the Bible. Well,
skip to the last page of the book, but I'm kidding.
I know it. We forget the details. That's why we go to church.
And I'm just trying to paint a picture from a non-believer's argument.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not, but this is kind of what we're talking about, though. We're trying to drag all this stuff out into the light and argue it in front of everybody and say, because there are some things that aren't explainable. And there are some things that are maybe, if we look at it from a historical document, we look at it.
Who the people were that Cain was afraid to go to.
That Cain.
Nobody will answer me.
What? I don't know this question.
The mark of Cain. Remember when God told him he had to go and he banished him and he said,
for killing Abel.
They're going to kill me. And he's like, well, I'm going to mark you and nobody will mess with you. Who are these nobodies? They were obviously somebody.
See, and this is what I'm talking about.
That's called Pulp Fiction.
That's
Pulp Fiction.
Growing up in the traditional Baptist church, none of this, I'm sure I read through that book and that verse and but they skipped right over that. And I would like to pull that out and discover deeper isolate those moments that are kind of glanced over, where it's like one of my favorite expressions. What happens when the immovable meets the unstoppable, the unexplainable? So when we reach those little, I don't want to call them
unexplainable.
I don't want to call it fractures.
The supernatural. There you go.
Yeah, those little moments in the Bible where, because they can't be explained, or no one has a clear way or comfort to talk about it. That's what I want to talk about, and that's what I want to put out.
The specific key to believing, because we're supposed to believe first.
Right.
Faith is given to us.
Right.
Faith is a gift granted to you by, your belief. And the belief being the size of a mustard seed can grow into exponentially. Maybe because in the Bible, it specifically says before Jesus, these souls will be waiting to be raised up.
Everything about the Bible is supernatural.
But what do you do when you sleep? You dream. You don't dream all the time, every time you sleep. But when you sleep, you dream.
That's our time. When you dream, pick up when you dream.
So when you dream, why not just say you're in another dimension, another heaven? There's various levels. Oh, absolutely. Everything has to start with energy. And what does energy make? And what's the first expression of energy? Frequency.
Okay.
So frequency, everything can be now with science. They can give you what frequency this is sitting here to make.
Right.
All of the elements, all of the molecules that are in here have to be at a certain frequency made out of certain elements to hold this. So if you were God and you understood that, you'd manifest things just by thinking of them.
By putting that energy out there.
Yes. But instead of being how would you call it? I don't want to sound like a heretic or a self-righteous, but instead of being a limited God, I guess you would say, to be an unlimited God, from how I understand it, you'd have to start from the smallest particle and let that particle become something.
So how do we unpack?
Instead of making it into.
How do we unpack all of this? That's what we struggled with the last episode. We kind of found a direction, and we're staying on course. We're trying to break it down, but
we take notes. We read them.
Well, but where do we start? Do we start at Cain? Do we literally start at the beginning and try to find these parts of the Bible that traditional, Baptists just glance over? I don't even know if it's Baptist. I'm sure
I think you have to start at the very beginning, where it explains that it's basically the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost that were looking down upon what they had already created. Now, what had going on before that point in the Bible where it starts, where they're looking down at what they created, I personally think there was a lot more going on before that went wrong. And I think perpetually everything goes wrong. And I think that's one of the parts about God that people have to accept, that only God within himself can contain himself when he lets himself go. Because it's got to have, like you said, a byproduct. It's got to have a pollution, or it's got to have evil.
So who wrote Genesis?
Supposedly, I think Moses.
He put all those books, all those chapters together and created Genesis. How far, and we're gonna have to, this is a whole nother rabbit hole. So how many, Moses lived to be a bazillion years old?
80.
80?
Yeah, I think it was 82. I'm not positive.
See, when I was a kid, they always told us everyone was like hundreds and hundreds.
Well, they were pretty, that their life had been lessened exponentially.
So in 80 years, how much time had passed since Adam and Eve?
Mm-hmm. I think theoretically it's 4,000 something years. See, that's where the discrepancies by the Bible's timeline is just shy of 6,000 or 7,000 years, I do believe. It's almost like these people try to prophesize what coming is the 7,000 year mark, and that's where we're coming up on now, that like Jesus says he'll come back, because things are going to be to that point.
So if 4,000 years passed in a time where the spoken word was how history was recorded, in other words, nobody was writing things down for a couple thousand years, I would assume.
Dashes and notches, like the Marian text,
cave drawings, things like that. How much of this is lost in interpretation? Like how much, and now I get that God would have come down to Moses and told, filled him with what to write. But how do we,
I think personally,
God comes down to me and tells me what to do every day. And then it's up to me to listen and try to follow, which is a monumental task. And I get wrong 99 times out of 100. So, and I'm not saying I'm Moses level, but if God came to him and told him what to write, we have to accept that Moses was 100% accurate.
He was 100% accurate and completely fallible at the same time.
That's what I was trying to get at, is we're putting faith in a human.
Think about it this way. God wouldn't even take him when he died. And on top of it, Moses got doomed to roam around because he wouldn't even let the devil have his bones. So what's that tell you?
Right.
He had he was not going to be, what do you call it, bound anywhere, I guess you would say, or his bones weren't going to be able to use in any kind of satanic
Ritual,
scientific experiment.
These are parts of the Bible that I haven't heard of.
No, these are parts of the Bible that I just make up as I go.
Okay. All right. Well, then
I like to put bits and pieces of the umpteen million things.
Moses,
but no, Moses did die and wasn't taken to heaven. That's the part we were just reading, and basically wasn't allowed, and his bones were fought with Satan. Who was it fought with his bones? Anyway, his bones were not allowed to be kept by the whatchamacallit, the Jews, because that was their tradition, to
right,
that little box after the bone body was gone and all that was left.
So this is in the Bible?
This is like what their history was later on in the Bible, for example. Like history now that they found that they've proved that these different apostles and different people throughout history were actually in the Bible. That's one of the reasons why history and archaeology has more proof and evidence on the truth of what the Bible says.
Moses specifically. You're saying that Moses wasn't Jesus?
Because he was stubborn. We just read it last week. That's what we were talking about. We'll go back and we'll find that specifically, and then we'll hit that. See, this is one of the points where we need to take note. We're some kind of mania.
Well, some of it will be transcribed, and that's where we'll pull our notes from. So we're going to put a footnote in that. We're going to look at Moses and see when he died, if he was put in purgatory, and then if his bones were kept in some top secret place with the JFK files.
Specifically, so I don't know. Like you said, maybe they took him back to Egypt, put him somewhere to keep something down or something.
So much here to unpack. So I don't think we came any closer to solving anything other than we
never
kind
will.
of drilled down a little bit here.
Except for Jesus is the only way.
Jesus is the only way. The Bible is, and it's not for interpretation, but it's for study and to help you grow in Christ.
Well, I think the problem with most Christians that they have with the interpretation part is the relationship, the individual relationship. They rely on other people to give them the interpretation for that.
And that's been the problem with the church since Martin Luther, and beyond.
It's man's desire to oppress man.
Right.
No matter what, because it's profitable. It's not.
That's a whole
it's
nother.
not profitable to give. Only to God. God profits from giving. It's called glory for Him that shared with you. So
there you go. So
on earth, it really doesn't pan out with the human condition and nature, and it's.
You ever think sometimes it would just be so much easier if you just got this thing over with?
I plead the fifth.
I'm tired of wondering. I'm trying to figure it out. Just get me to that last page. No, I'm kidding. But, well, not really.
I'm not.
But it can be exhausting.
That's why God gave me a roadblock called a child.
Well, Nephilim.
I'd be in L.A. right now. I'd show him how to make stuff. Trump.
I think Nephilim for me is a key. I think Nephilim really opens my eyes in terms of something else that I wasn't taught in the Bible. The Bible is the only book that I know, but you refer to a lot of other things, and I'm a history guy, but I've never let those two things cross. Always.
Yeah, all these things haven't come out until until the last 10 years. And it's mainly because of the internet, because of people going on there and asking questions. And then, one person's not scared to delve into something. And, the best thing about Christianity really is also the worst thing about Christianity. All the different types of denominations, they really should be looking at each other to see who's got the right
Well,
thing going on.
and we talked about that
There's a lot to be learned from
last
each other.
episode. Is the Quran also handed down from God?
Did you watch what I sent you last night?
No, I hadn't had a
Okay,
chance.
that question.
All right, I'll look at that. But we have all these other spiritual beliefs. We're not going to call them Christianity, but we have other parts of the world at the same time that have other spiritual direction, God's understanding of God.
It's all spiritualism.
And is it all the same thing, just broken down?
Of the same thing. Only one that's true is Jesus. That's why he came last.
But are we looking at the CEO and then the CFO and the COO and the CMO? And is it a governing body of all these other things? Or is it the end all be all?
Well, there's supposed to be tens of thousands of angels. So there's got to be a ton of, and I think it's either 5 or 7 different types of angels, specific, explained in the Bible.
Where is this in the Bible?
We're going to find it.
So let's do this next week. Let's break down our angel playbook. Let's do a fantasy draft of an angel team. We'll pick our all-star angel lineup. And then let's look and see how those angels interact.
No, I'm not specifically talking about named angels. I think there's only, what is it, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and it's the Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
There's actually only 3, I think, that are named by name.
Okay.
Besides the Lord's angel. Angel of the Lord. You do realize that when it says angel of the Lord, it's speaking of Jesus.
Right.
Pre-incarnate Jesus.
Correct.
But I'm talking about like types. There's like classifications of
Right,
angels.
like
not just this angel.
A warrior.
Yeah, like
a
when it talks about
peacemaker.
Daniel, the big wheel with the eyes on it.
Mm.
Satan was a cherub or a seraphim. Different angels in that facet.
So we could look at these and look at modern day technology things and compares that.
That's you saying that kind of makes the light bulb go off to think about different spiritual beliefs and how it influences the religiousness of them. Makes sense. Different types of angels doing different things, having being a different identity. So therefore their expressionalism is different.
But are angels supposed to manifest themselves looking like humans?
They can, yes.
But they could very well be a computer or a cell phone or a satellite
or a frequency blip,
an EMP, whatever. So
energy, basically.
So how much of this, again, going back to what I said earlier, of God laying out for a very primitive man, a very easy to understand story of himself and his will and his intention with us. And as we evolve and we become more complex, we can understand more. Like Adam would not understand how to drive a car.
Oh, absolutely. I see what you're saying.
But now that we've grown into being more godlike, being more Christ-like, not gods, but more like Christ, like God, and our brains are developed to be able to do these unexplainable pieces of technology and build these skyscrapers like we do that now. Are we slowly becoming what God intended us to become so that he can come back in his full form?
No.
Okay.
I don't think anything that we are physically, because we can't control any of it, is any of it in any way an intent of what he wanted us to be before we sinned.
No. I don't mean that. I mean, for him to come back.
Oh, he's going to come back because it's going to be wrong. The devil's going to done worked his way in it so much that it's going to all go and really.
Okay.
Or not humanity.
Right, the world.
Is going to be duped into believing that God has revealed itself to him. And I think personally, because it's going to
as a computer,
it's going to be a lot of
phone.
Brainwashed ignorance. People are going to be
as a cell phone, as
washed
the
out.
internet. Yep.
Supernatural is being counterfeited.
So
It's
that's
not counterfeited. Like what we are seeing with technology is supernatural, but it's rewired.
but is that the counterfeit?
Yes.
Are we evolving to
Devil's counterfeit is perpetual motion in what we develop.
Christ is God is letting us evolve, devolve, whichever you want to say.
Because the serpent said, you will be like gods. The first thing that we would do, like Jesus told us not to do, is think of God first and love him and our neighbors.
So when
You cannot do that when you're trying to think about what you want.
So when you put yourself in two places, we're going to wrap up with this. When you put yourself at home with your big screen TV and your Netflix and your iPhone, and you get your hour at the end of the day to decompress and stare at the nightly news or porn or murder movies or anything that is a normal and everyday household. But do you feel peace, or do you feel those people don't feel peace? They feel
You feel hormones.
a thirst that they can't quench any other way.
You feel a chemical reaction.
But then you take that same person and you remove them from that and put them out in the middle of Wyoming in a field, and you let them sit there for 3 days, and they decompress, and they start to. Now they can feel the wind, they can smell the air, they become connected with what true peace is.
You mean like the garden?
That's what I'm getting at. So when we look at those two things, how much is all this technology telling us that this is the devil, this is the Antichrist, this is the end that for some reason we keep, even as Christians, keep embracing in our lives?
Well, when we as Christians truly have the Holy Spirit and the veil is lifted, we see it around us. And then we do exactly what Jesus told us to do. Use it for good.
Which is what we're doing here.
Everybody could do the same thing with the garden at their own house, in their own casa. As like the Japanese did with their, why do you think they build gardens in their backyard?
So guys, that's a great way to end this. So we're going to call it quits. I think we wrapped this up pretty strong, but we're going to continue to follow this from where we left off, because I think we'll start with Cain and we'll see who he was referring to, and we'll see how that, you do that a lot. I pick that up on when I'm editing it. But we're going to start from the beginning next week. OCD at its finest. That's what you want in a chef. So, all right, guys. Peace out. God bless you. Open your Bible. All we're trying to do, if you're watching this and you're one of those legalistic Baptist Sunday pew warmers, God bless you. Don't take what we're saying too much to heart. Take it to heart, but open your mind a little bit. We're just trying to have some fun. We're trying to stimulate some conversation. But some of this stuff is worth talking about, because like I said, when I grew up, I don't remember any of this. And if Eric's, getting a little soft in the head, we're going to validate. We're going to validate all this too. So debunk it, demyth it, discover it. I don't know, but unless a rapture happens tonight, peace out.